Today on Think Smart with TMFG, Mike and I are going to be talking about mistakes that you're likely to make while filing your tax return. Mike, this weekend on Sunday, I did my, it's like the coming of spring. Springs, things are starting to melt outside. I can see some green shoots coming through in the back garden, and it means I got to do my taxes.
When was the last time you didn't get a notice of reassessment? I can't remember how many years back.
Well, actually, I'm pretty good.
I usually get small ones. There's always $20 or $40 that comes in. Got missed somewhere.
I don't know. I've been pretty lucky. It's because I owe so much damn money. I think they don't bother to reassess it because they might owe me if it got reassessed. Anyways, my process is quite simple. What I do all year, whenever I get paper copies of things, I just stick them in a folder.
Yep.
Regardless, they're a folder for 2024. They're there.
Yep.
And then what I do is I take that box of paper, and it's typically this high, and I literally take the dining room table and I put them all out on the dining room table and sort them by where they came from.
Yeah.
And typically they all fit on the dining room table. I don't have any that overflow. It's sort of, and then I just start putting them together. Like I'll put, whether it's the banks together or investments together and utilities together.
Do you use HubDoc for any of your stuff? I know you use it for
no,
business.
not for that stuff. And then what's left is all the stuff that I really need for tax season.
Yeah. There are some good programs for people out there, things like HubDoc that we do use for the business, where you can take pictures of your receipt. I'm saying one that we use, there's probably 100 of them out there. But they go and they collate everything for you and make it so you're not carrying that big bundle of paper around. I have the George Costanza wallet all the time that I take out that's stuff like here too with receipts. So I should take my own advice.
So I thought today what we'd do is we'd talk a little bit about mistakes you're likely to make. We'll start with number one. The filing deadline. So the deadline is April 30th, 2025. And that's for most people who are filing a tax return in Canada. If your spouse, common law partner, whatever it may be, have a business or self-employed, you have to pay your taxes if you owe by April 30th, but you don't need to file your return till June 15th.
That's a confusing one. You have to pay them even though you don't know what they are.
Well, exactly. Like you sort of think you're getting a delay, but you've got to do your return.
Yeah.
So why would you wait to do your return, pay the amount that you owe, then submit it 8 weeks later? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But anyways, we're not saying everything CRA does makes a lot of sense. Yep. If you're expecting a refund, there's no penalty for late filing. So that's interesting. So sometimes people, when they're expecting a refund, won't file on time.
Yep.
I don't think that's a good idea, because all you're doing is leaving that money with the government.
Yep.
When you could be earning interest today, even at 3-4%, you're at least earning money on your money.
Once a year, I have one client who come in who hasn't filed in 5 years, and they say they owe me money. They come up with the last 5-year returns, and it's a pain to do after the fact. It costs more money. It's just not a great strategy.
Next up is AI is now a reality, and I think we've got to accept it is going. If you were trying to minimize your tax bill by maybe not submitting things, that's becoming really, really difficult to do. The government is using AI to analyze tax returns, analyze the data, collect information. They now know where to look. Before, that was more difficult. They had to figure it out. Now they can just use AI to figure out where are the mistakes being made, where are people more likely to take advantage of things, and they're gonna collect their share. That's inevitable.
If you think of CRA, it's almost a business that the more money they can collect, the better off they are. And if they can put some effort into AI to find ways to get more money out of people, they're going to do it. It's an organization's out to get money for themselves in there.
So I thought it was interesting, just tied into that, we just saw a headline that they're letting go 450 seasonal workers in the middle of tax season. Now, maybe that's because AI has taken over, but it seems strange when, as you say, it's a revenue source for the government. Yeah. Why wouldn't they at least keep those 450 people employed until maybe, at the end of April?
Yeah.
Anyways, you don't always need proof. A lot of documents now go to CRA directly.
Yep.
So how does that work, Mike?
Eventually, when you do your tax return, you just kind of have to press a button. Right. Because they have 90% of the information anyway. So when you receive any T-slips like T3s, T5s, T5008s, T4s, anything like that, T4 RIFs, anything comes out on a sort of official government slip, they get a copy of that when it's sent to you at the same time. And generally speaking, if you do your own taxes, as soon as you hit your program and you put in your profile, you hit download, all that information we download automatically into your tax return. Basically what you're doing now when you do a tax return is just fill in the blanks. Anything that was missed, or still there's some, like with ourselves, management fees are something that don't come out on a T slip or a government slip. So you have to manually enter in your fees. If you do charitable donations, generally speaking, your charitable donations, a lot of times you have to manually enter those in. If you're doing medical deductions, you have to manually enter those. So there are still those manual entries, but probably 80 to 90% of your tax return CRA has.
So let's look at a couple of areas where that isn't the case. One would be medical expenses. So the government has no idea during, in a calendar year what you've spent on medical expenses. So you're going to need to provide receipts.
Yep.
Charitable donations, as you mentioned, maybe one day we have to put our social insurance number in if we're making a charitable donation so that it does get registered properly. Education expenses would be another one. If you've got investment property like a rental real estate, things like that, you do need to keep those receipts.
Yep.
And you are going to need to submit them, and you're probably going to get audited on it every now and again.
And when we say audit, it's not really an audit. People come in and say, I'm being audited, and they think someone did something wrong on their tax return. Really, it has nothing to do with who's preparing your tax return or if anything was done right or wrong. It's just they require proof for this. And it's not really an audit. They're not saying anything's wrong. They say, you put this in here. We just want to see the backup. So it's very different than audit when they say there's something wrong with your tax return. You try to mislead us in some type of format. This is just saying you put this in there. We just want to see the documentation behind it.
Next, do I need a chartered accountant for someone to do my taxes? So there's a lot of different ways you could do it yourself. You could download one of the software programs. Like when I say do it yourself, I mean with pen and paper. So we still had, I don't know whether,
I think we have two people that still do that.
Two
They're
people
passing
still
away
do
pretty
it.
quick.
They are. I think one of them passed away last year, unfortunately, but they were still doing it with mostly pencil.
Yep.
Because they could make changes. So the next step is downloading one of the programs that are relatively cheap.
They're pretty good now, too.
Right?
And they do income
good.
split, and they do a lot of, the pen and paper, I couldn't imagine doing, because with income split rules now, it's almost impossible to do on pen and paper. These new programs have tax optimization software that will go and come up with the right amount to split, put things in the right area to be the most beneficial for you. So they're not bad.
And if you bring in AI, which a lot of these programs have done, it's going to make it even better. They're going to come up with better solutions that even the previous tax program wouldn't have figured out. Next up is giving it to a tax service. So we have our own tax service here, TMFG Tax Service. We have an accountant who basically goes in and does tax returns on behalf of our clients.
Yeah.
Reasonable fee, $249. And we've got a lot of clients that take advantage of it.
Yep.
And because they can't be bothered, they don't want to have to do they don't mind gathering the receipts and bringing them in a shoebox, but they don't want to do the work. Yep. I get it. So, and the last one is where you've got maybe a corporation or a trust, and you really need to have a professional do your tax return. And they're good at it, but you're going to pay for it. And it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And the problem is most CAs that we meet don't want to do personal tax returns. It's really the last thing. If they're advanced in their field as a CA, they want to do corporate stuff, the more complicated stuff. Generally speaking, they're not going to want to sit down and do a personal tax return.
So what are some hints to make sure you're getting the best return? If you are getting money back, get it back as soon as possible. If you owe money, delay that as long as possible, I think is the
Get it ready.
answer.
Just submit it on the 30th.
Just submit it on the 30th. I don't know what the numbers are. My guess is probably only 80% of Canadians submit it on time.
Yep.
That's a random number that I just came up with. So number one, get it done. The sooner, the better. If you're working with the TMFG tax service, the sooner we have it, the sooner you're going to get the money back or have your return complete. Next up, keep a backup available. Don't take your receipts and put them in Canada Post, which may or may not be on strike, and send them to us because you may never see them again. So that's not a good strategy.
I just moved houses. You wouldn't believe how many boxes of backup I have.
Right?
I have about 5 full cartons of tax return backups.
Well, that goes to the next one. You only need to keep 6 years.
Yep.
Used to be 7 years, now it's 6 years. So you don't need to keep it forever. Yep. Okay? Clients will often say to me, do I need to keep like all my investment statements? No, I just keep year end.
Yep.
If you want a summary of your investments for the year, we can provide that in 2 minutes by just giving us a call or sending us an email. Today, I think everyone knows what a PDF is.
Yep.
So you're best to copy it to a PDF. And that way you have a record of it if you ever need it. If government ever calls on you for a missing receipt, you got a PDF of it.
We store them in our clients' box files now, and that's been phenomenal. Box is just people can access them. Whenever I have questions on my tax returns, I can be anywhere and access my tax return in literally 2 minutes. It's fantastic.
Next up, work from home expenses. So this one goes back and forth. Last year, you could just say, I work from home, and you get a $500 credit. Now you got to provide the receipts. So as less and less people are working from home, that's starting to change. So now it's a Form 2200 that you've got to submit, basically, of all the different things you can deduct. And the premise is, let's say you're using a room in your house as an office, and that room makes up 10% of your space. Yep. You have 2,000 square feet, so you get to deduct 1/10 of your home expenses. Yep. That's a pretty good deal.
And just what we say to people, don't push it too much. People go and push it too hard, that's when you have the problems. I mean, auto expenses, you can't push to a limit. You got to make sure not to push those too far, because the government will come back on those things.
They know what the averages are, right? And if they see you above the average, you're going to get an X mark or a little flag.
AI it's not a person now. AI is just going through your tax return. They press a button. AI goes through everything and says, well, this doesn't quite line up with their business model.
A lot of scams today. How many times you used to get an email? Now you get phone calls. I get texts saying, you owe money to the CRA, click on this, or we're gonna send out the police to put you in jail. Most people know it's a scam. When I say most, what is it, 80% of people know? The other 20% may fall victim to it. Yep. And there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year lost to these scams. And a lot of them is the CRA. I had one the other day, it was a parking ticket last night. My wife said to me, she said, are you getting a lot of these messages? I said, I've had 4 today.
Yep.
But our phones aren't linked, so I don't know what's going on there. Anyways, 10 common mistakes. Number 1, missing the filing deadline. Number 2, entering incorrect information. Okay, all the more reason to use a computer. You forget a zero, a decimal place, something like that. Forgetting to report all of your income. Even little things, if the government's giving you money, you've got to report that.
Yep.
Right? Not claiming eligible deductions and credits. People miss that all the time.
Yeah. Disability is a big one. We always tell people, we probably get more money back for clients in disability credits because they don't realize they're eligible. All they have to do is see their doctor. They can even backdate to when they became disabled. It's a big tax credit. Not
checking over contributions. You could be over-contributed to your first home savings account, your RSP, your TFSA. Lots of places to make mistake. So you've got to make sure you're on top of that. Ignoring foreign income. If you've got foreign income and you ignored it, or if you've got foreign income, there may be a tax credit from that foreign income.
The government's getting better communicating between countries.
We have some people who really want to file really early. Like they want to do it in February. You don't have all the tax slips. You've got to at least wait, I think, until probably next week.
Yeah, people get very confused.
And what are we today? Sorry, I should say that we're March the 10th today. So by March 17th, you pretty much have to have all those slips.
The deadline for many of the tax slips is March 30th or March 31st. People get confused and think it's February 28th. That's for our RSP deadline. It's not the deadline for companies to get out their tax slips. Hopefully you're going to have most of them by March 15th, but some companies take a long time, particularly if you get into some more fancy investments. Remember, we used to do oil and gas, limited partnerships, things like that that are more complex. It can take up to the end of March before you get those tax slips back.
One of the other little things that I think is easy to do is not looking at the dates. We're doing 24, I know we're in 2025, but you're doing your 2024 tax return. So those receipts should be from 2024. It's really easy to slip a receipt in there from 2025 because we're already, 3 months into the year and you may have got a charitable donation. Well, that doesn't apply for last year. It's for next year. Next up, not going to the CRA website. So let me give you an example. So a client of mine, elderly client, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he did his own tax returns. He clicked a box that said, I just want email communication. But what he didn't know is that meant he had to go into the CRA website and actually look to see if there's any mail. So CRA will send you an email saying you've got mail.
Yeah.
You actually have to go in and see what that mail is.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. I mean, trying to get into CRA is not easy. You got this grid method. You're going through your banking system, your partner. It's trying to get into Fort Knox. For the average person, it's not easy.
Yep.
And if you get locked out, you can't get in for sometimes weeks.
Yep.
So, but if you do get in, read your mail. Just at least, and delete it. You don't want to go in and see that someone has 8 notices that they haven't looked at. They may be requesting information So in January, they sent you an email saying, we need this information.
Yep.
It's now March. If you haven't provided that information, you may have started an audit.
Yep.
Whereas before, they were just asking for clarification. Now they want to do a deep dive.
I think gets very confusing for a lot of people in tax returns is installment payments. Because installment payments, what year they count for, gets to be a very confusing thing. When you start paying your installments in March installment, is that for 2024? Is that your next one for 2025? People get very confused with that. Also, as income changes and your installments change, it's a year lag between your installments adjust to your actual income. And that people have a hard time working that out. And you got to sit down with your advisor and try to figure those numbers out.
So March 15th is the big date, but it's March. It falls on a Saturday this week. So you actually got to get them the money by March 14th.
Yep.
Little things like that. Otherwise, the money's not arriving till
Monday, then you're
the
late,
17th.
and then you're in a penalty situation.
Then you're in a penalty situation. That brings us to the end of another week. This is Rob and Mike with Think Smart from the McClelland Financial Group of Assante Capital Management.